For this assignment, we're going to be using the Pythagorean Theorem and trigonometry, so the sine, cosine, and tangent, to find the area of a triangle. Right? So it says finding the area of each triangle. So first thing you got to remember is that the area of a triangle is 1/2 times the base times the height. 1/2 base times height. So that's the area formula. Let's keep reading the directions here. It says round each intermediate values to the nearest tenth. Use the rounded values to calculate the next value. Round your final answer to the nearest tenth. So while we're going through and solving this, we have a few steps, and each step you're going to round to the nearest tenth and then use that for the next one. So let me walk you through a couple of these. I'll get you going at least. Number one, first thing that I notice is that the 9 is the same as on both sides. So this is an isosceles triangle, which means that these two parts are equal. So if this from here to there is 4.6, it's going to be 4.6 on the left side as well. Okay, so the base of a triangle and the height of a triangle are always perpendicular. So that's why we need this dashed line through the middle, and you see the right angle there. So that's telling us that this height is perpendicular, and the base is going to be both of those. So there's the base. So the base, I simply just add the 4.6 with the 4.6. So if I add those together, I have the B, which is going to give us 9.2. Okay, so I know the base. Now I just need to know the height. So how do we find the height? Well, you need to remember the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. All right, so if we plug these in, here's my right angle, so the hypotenuse is going to be the 9, so that's the c. So I'm going to have 9 squared equals 4.6 squared plus the height squared. So once I solve this, then I'm going to have the height, and then find the area is a piece of cake. So I'm going to square the 4.6. So that's 4.6 times itself. So that's going to be 21.16 plus h squared equals 81. 9 squared is 81. So I'm solving this for h. So I need to subtract that 21.16. Subtract that on both sides. Oops, forgot the one in there. So if I subtract 81 and 21.16, looks like 59.84. So that's going to be h squared. Now, if you remember, how do you undo the square? You square root. So if I square root both sides, let's see, type that in my calculator here. H is going to be 7.7. It says to round to the nearest tenth. Came out to be 7.735, so the 7.7 is what it's going to stay. So now I know the B and I know the H. So here's the B and here's the H. So now I just plug it into the area formula up there. So 1/2 times the base times the height. And just grab your calculator, do 1/2, which is 0.5, or you can do 1 divided by 2, times 9.2 times 7.7, and it's going to come out to be 35.42, but it says to round to the nearest tenth, so 35.4. So that's going to be the area. I'm going to use capital A for area there. Okay, so to type this in your calculator, you can multiply the 9.2 and the 7.7, and then just divide it by 2 after you get that answer. There's several ways to write that in, but that's the gist of it there. You want to find the base and you want to find the height. So if you look at number 2, you already have the base. All right, you just don't have that perpendicular line like we did in number 1 right there. So you make it yourself. Just put a perpendicular line right down the middle. And since this is an isosceles triangle, because the sides are the same, they're both 10, we know that this 15.2 is going to be split evenly, this side and that side. So you just divide the 15.2 by 2, and each of those sides is going to be 7.6. Now the only reason you need that is so that you can use the Pythagorean theorem to find the height. So we'd have 7.6 squared plus h squared equals 10 squared. And I'm going to let you finish solving that. Once you got the h, the 15 is the b, and just plug it into the 1/2 base times height. Okay, numbers 5, 6, and 7 and 8, I believe, are just reviewing sine, cosine, tangent. So remember SOHCAHTOA. Okay, that's the little way to remember these. So the sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent opposite over adjacent. So remember, label your sides. So the 11 is the hypotenuse. The x is right beside the 34, so that's the adjacent. So this is going to be the cosine. So I'll set it up for you just to remind you how to do that, and then let you solve it. Cosine 34 equals the adjacent is x over the hypotenuse is 11. So just solve this for x multiplied by the 11, and you got it. So those are just review. So 9, 10, 11, and 12, they're very similar to the first four, except you're not going to use Pythagorean theorem much. You maybe could, but the sine, cosine, tangent is what you're going to be using more of for these. So I'm going to rewrite those. So SOHCAHTOA. But again, we're looking for the area of the triangle, so it's 1/2 base times height. And you want to round things to the nearest tenth again. So you need a few things for these. Okay, here's going to be the height, it's the one perpendicular. The base is going to be this whole distance down here. We have 13 of it right there. We don't know this part. All right, so you're going to use sine, cosine, tangent in order to find both the height and this other part of the base. So if we look at these triangles, we have two small triangles inside of a bigger triangle. Those two small triangles are both right triangles. All right, so I'm going to look at this triangle first because I know one of the sides is 13, and I need to find this height here. So that's where I'm going to start because that's the side, that's the triangle that I know the side. So we have to figure out which pieces we're looking at. All right, so the angles here, the right angle is there, so the hypotenuse is across from it. I don't know the hypotenuse, but I know the 13 is the adjacent and the h is the opposite. And then I'm going to plug those in to which one? Looks like the tangent, because that's using the opposite and the adjacent. So I have tangent of my angle, 55, equals opposite is h over adjacent is 13. So I'm solving this for the height, so I multiply by 13 on both sides. Then grab a calculator, do 13 times the tangent 55, and h is going to be 18.7. Oh, sorry, 18.6. 18.6. I was looking at that wrong. So now that I know the h, I can use the h. Let me label that here, 18.6. I can use that h to find that red line there. So in the other triangle, I know that this angle is 24. Maybe I should switch colors since I was using red before. So in the green line is what I'm looking for. So there's my angle. So this red opposite word, that's for the other triangle, but it happens to be the same here. The h is going to be opposite for the green as well. And then I'm looking for the adjacent. Okay, so that looks like it's going to be tangent of my angle is 24 equals the opposite over the adjacent. I don't know the adjacent, that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to call it x. Okay, so whenever your x is in the bottom, you recall from previous videos, we multiply by the x, and then we're going to divide by the tangent. So we got x tangent 24 equals 18.6, so divide both sides by the tangent. And then I got my x. So if I grab my calculator, 18.6 divided by tangent of 24 gives me 41.8. Now that's not the whole base, right? That's just part of it. So if I go back and look at the triangle, the green line and that blue line is going to add up to give me the base. So I'm going to add to that 41, I'm going to add 13, and then I'm going to get my base of 54.8. So there's the base. My height was 18.6. Now I can plug it into the area, and then it's a piece of cake. 1/2 base times the height. 18.6. Grab the calculator, multiply 54.8 times 18.6, and divide it by 2. We've got 509.6. Okay, so those are all very much the same as those that I went through. If you got questions, let me know.